Good day, everyone. I am tasked to present Unit 2 of our course on the bonding models, and we will start with the basics, ionic and covalent bonds. Then we move through the theoretical frameworks like valence bond theories and molecular orbital theory. I specifically volunteered for this topic since bonding theories are complicated for me. This presentation is divided into four main parts. In part 1, we will discuss the fundamentals of chemical bonds, focusing on ionic and covalent bonds. And in part 2, we'll be into valence bond theory, explaining how atomic orbitals overlap. In part 3, we'll explore hybridization, which helps us predict molecular shapes. And finally, in part 4, we will look into molecular orbital theory to understand how molecular orbitals are formed and what they tell us about molecular stability. So we start with part 1 on chemical bonds. Imagine you're preparing a complex drug formulation where you need to blend oil-based and water-based components. So despite mixing them thoroughly, you notice that they quickly separate and forming two distinct layers. Even if you try to shake it up again, the same thing happens. Why do you think this occurs? So one might say it's because oil is nonpolar and water is polar, and they don't interact well at the molecular level, causing them to separate. Notice the formula of water. The two bonds between oxygen and hydrogen, this one and another bond, consist of an electron pair because you have one electron here and another electron here, the same as on the next bond, one electron and another electron. So two electrons are shared, this one and this one, shared between the oxygen atom and the hydrogen atom. The oxygen and hydrogen atoms each donate one electron to this electron pair. However, they don't share them equally. Your oxygen atom here takes more than its fair share of the electron pair. When we talk about polarity between water and oil, we need to define terms first, and we have the term electronegativity. Linus Pauling came up with the concept of electronegativity to help explain the nature of chemical bonds. It is the measure of the ability of an atom in a bond to attract electrons. And hence, we have the Pauling electronegativity values, which follow predictable periodic trends with the higher electronegativities towards the upper right of the periodic table, with fluorine having the highest value of 4.0. Notice that each atom has electronegativity values, and so when two atoms form a bond, their difference in electronegativity determines the bond type. So according to this table, you have a nonpolar covalent bond when the electronegativity difference is very small or close to zero. An example of this is your hydrogen molecule. So we look at hydrogen molecule here. So for hydrogen molecule, electronegativity of hydrogen is 2.1. And hence, electronegativity difference calculation, since hydrogen is two hydrogen atoms, that is, difference in electronegativity is equal to 2.1 minus 2.1, and that is the electronegativity difference of 0. And this is considered a nonpolar covalent compound. Now we go to the next example, which is your covalent compounds. So covalent compounds, the electronegativity difference is moderate, between 0.4 and 1.7. An example of this covalent compound is your water molecule. So water molecule is H2O. So since the electronegativity of oxygen is 3.4 and for your hydrogen it is 2.1, the electronegativity difference for oxygen and hydrogen is 3.4 less 2.1. That is about 1.3, and that is between 0.4 and 1.7. That means water is a covalent, polar covalent compound. And next we go to your ionic bond. So ionic bond, according to this table, you have an electronegativity difference which is greater than 1.7, which is very large. An example of your ionic bond here is sodium chloride. So sodium chloride, let's take this. Sodium chloride. The electronegativity of sodium is 0.9, and the electronegativity of chlorine atom is 3.2. So computing the electronegativity difference, we have 3.2 less 0.9, and that is 0.1, 2.3. And 2.3 is greater than 1.7, and hence your sodium chloride is an ionic compound. This method of calculating the electronegativity difference is useful for predicting the type of bond that will form between two atoms. The result of this uneven sharing is a dipole moment, or dipole, a separation of charge within the bond. Which bond has an even electron sharing? So among the three bonds that we've discussed a while back, the polar covalent bond is the one with an equal electron sharing. And if we have the example on hydrogen fluoride, the reason hydrogen is electron poor and fluorine is electron rich comes down to differences in electronegativity and how the electrons are distributed in the bond. Our example in the previous slide is water. And we consider again another example here, which is your hydrochloric acid or your hydrogen chloride. The hydrogen atom is considered electron poor and the chlorine atom is considered electron rich. If we compute for the electronegativity difference, chlorine has significantly higher electronegativity than hydrogen. Chlorine here has an electronegativity of 3.1 and your hydrogen having the electronegativity of 2.1 or 2.1. So when we compute for the electronegativity difference, again, it is 3.1 less 2.1. We have an electronegativity difference of 1.0, which is between your 0.4 to 1.7, and hence we consider it a polar covalent bond. So this difference in electronegativity means that chlorine has a much stronger tendency to attract the shared pair of electrons in the hydrochloric acid bond toward itself. So it's pulling it more to the chlorine or to the chlorine atom. So the chlorine, being more electronegative, pulls the bonding electrons closer to itself. As a result, since this is an electron, it becomes electron rich and it becomes more electronegative. It becomes more negatively charged with a partial negative charge of, or this what we call delta negative, because it is holding onto the electrons more tightly. Conversely, your hydrogen here becomes electron poor, which makes it become slightly positively charged because the shared electrons spend more time around your chlorine and less time around hydrogen. Covalent bonds that have a dipole moment are called polar covalent bonds. So the ones with dipole moment are called your polar covalent bonds. And the magnitude of the dipole moment and the polarity of the bond depend on the electronegativity difference. So let us check these examples here. We have your ammonia and your nitrogen trifluoride. So for your ammonia, you can see that it has a trigonal pyramidal geometry due to the lone pair that we have here on nitrogen. So electronegativity wise, nitrogen is more electronegative than hydrogen. So you will see it here in our periodic table. This is nitrogen and this is hydrogen. Remember that electronegativity increases this way. So nitrogen is more electronegative than hydrogen, causing the bonding electrons to be pulled towards your nitrogen. So the resulting dipole moment, the ammonia has a net dipole moment toward your nitrogen because the dipole moments of each NH bond do not cancel out. This gives your ammonia a polar nature. Now we'll look at your nitrogen trifluoride. So the structure of your nitrogen trifluoride is similar to your uh, ammonia here. So it is a trigonal pyramidal geometry. But electronegativity wise, you have here your fluorine atoms. Fluorine is much more electronegative than your nitrogen. So the bonding electrons are pulled toward your fluorine atoms. It is pulled towards that. So the resulting dipole moment, despite its similar shape to ammonia, the dipole moment in your nitrogen trifluoride points away from nitrogen towards the fluorine atoms. However, you will see here that you still have a dipole moment for nitrogen trifluoride. Question, is the dipole moment for nitrogen trifluoride larger or smaller than that of ammonia? So the answer here is ammonia has a larger dipole moment with 1.46 compared to your nitrogen trifluoride, which has only 0.24. Although both your ammonia and nitrogen trifluoride have dipole moments because of their polar bonds and their asymmetric geometry, which is trigonal pyramidal, your ammonia has a larger dipole moment because the nitrogen is pulling electrons from less electronegative hydrogen atoms. And nitrogen trifluoride, despite having more electronegative fluorine atoms, has smaller dipole moment because the dipoles partially cancel out. You will see here, it will partially cancel out each other due to the orientation of the fluorine atoms relative to the lone pair of your nitrogen. Thus, both your ammonia and nitrogen trifluoride exhibit dipole moments, but your ammonia is more polar than your nitrogen trifluoride. So according to this table, if we look at the dipole moment, if it has very small to none dipole moment, that is your nonpolar covalent compound. If it has a dipole moment, it is definitely a covalent polar compound. And it has no dipole moment and it has full separation of the charge, that is your ionic compound. And that is in relation to your charges for nonpolar compounds. Since there is no dipole moment, there will be no partial charges. And for covalent compounds, since there is dipole moment, we have delta plus and delta minus. You have partial charges. And for ionic compounds, you don't have partial charges. Rather, you have full positive and negative charges, or your cations or anions. Another question, does the presence of one or more polar bonds in a molecule always result in a polar molecule? In our figures below, you can easily see if these molecules are nonpolar, polar, or ionic. So here you can see na pantay sila, hence this is a nonpolar molecule. Ito, your hydrogen fluoride, we had this as an example a while back. And fluorine atom is more electronegative than your hydrogen, and this has a partial positive and a partial negative nature, and this makes them a polar covalent compound. And your sodium chloride, you can see here your cation and your anion, or the full separation of charges. These are ionic compounds. For your hydrogen fluoride, this is easy to see if polar. However, for a molecule with more than 2 atoms, it is more difficult to tell polar molecules from non-polar ones because 2 or more polar bonds may cancel one another. So a polar molecule is one with polar bonds, yes, that when you add together, they do not cancel each other to form a net dipole moment. Remember that a polar covalent compound should have a dipole moment. Therefore, the two polar bonds must not cancel each other. For example, our water here, we had this as an example a while ago. You have one polar covalent bond here and another polar covalent bond here. So each bond is polar because the difference in electronegativity between your oxygen and hydrogen is 1.4. And water has two dipole moments. This is one and this is another one. And the two dipole moments, as you can see here in our structure, in our geometry, they do not cancel out. And the molecule is polar. But when we consider your carbon dioxide, each bond here is polar. As you can see, you have your oxygen and carbon, and it is polar because oxygen and carbon difference is 1.0. So that is polar covalent bond. However, as you can see in the structure here, that the geometry of carbon dioxide is linear. This is linear. So it goes to this way. So the dipole moment of one bond is completely cancelled out by the other. And therefore, although these two bonds here are polar bonds, the molecule of carbon dioxide is nonpolar because it is cancelled out. So if we look at this example, we determine the dipole moment and polarity. We have here your water, and we've already seen this in our example a while ago. Looking at its structure, this is a polar molecule. Polar because it do not cancel out the dipole moments, and this is a polar bond. This is a polar bond, oxygen being more electronegative than hydrogen. And for your carbon dioxide here, this is a non-polar molecule. Non-polar because although these bonds here are polar molecules, oxygen being more electronegative than carbon, the dipole moments cancel out. You can easily see that in the structure. So this has no dipole moment. This is with dipole moment. And here in our third example, for sulfur dioxide, you can see, looking at its structure, this is a polar molecule again. Polar meaning it has a dipole moment. So you can see here that this is a polar molecule, polar bond, and this is another polar bond. However, the polar bonds do not cancel the dipoles out. Compared to your methane, we can see here that we cancel out your CH, your CH, your CH, and your CH again here. So this is a non-polar molecule because it has no dipole moment. So this is the answers for that exercise. Now we look at the difference between your ionic and covalent bonds. In our previous slides, we saw the difference of ionic and covalent bonds according to the dipole moments and the presence of charges. For ionic bonds, it doesn't have a dipole moment at all. For covalent bonds, it has dipole moments because there is an equal sharing between your two atoms. For the presence of charges, for the ionic bonds, you have a full separation of charge. You can have positive and negative charges there. That is already your cation and your anion. For covalent bonds, you will see a partial negative and partial positive charges. And aside from the differences in electronegativity, presence of dipole moment, and differences in charges, you will see here that the ionic bonds are between metals and nonmetals. So you will see here that your nonmetals are your green atoms, your metals are in teal, and your orange here are your metalloids. So for ionic bonds, it is between your metals and your nonmetals. So between the teal and between your green. The typical example that we have here a while ago is your sodium chloride. So your sodium chloride here is a metal, and your chloride or chlorine is a non-metal. So that is between a metal and a non-metal, that is your ionic bonds. And covalent bonds are between two non-metal ions. So we have the example of hydrochloric acid. So for your hydrochloric acid, you have your hydrogen here and you have your chlorine again here. So this is between two non-metals. So another example is your hydrogen fluoride. We put here hydrogen fluoride. So is this ionic or covalent? So by electronegativity, it looks ionic because your fluorine is very electronegative compared to your hydrogen. However, considering this factor that your hydrogen is a nonmetal and your fluorine also is a nonmetal, plus the complete transfer of electrons, it is a covalent, polar covalent compound, not an ionic compound. In summary, this is the difference between your non-polar compounds, covalent polar compounds, and your ionic compounds. Looking into these different parameters, you have your electron sharing, equal sharing for your non-polar compounds, equal. Hence, the electronegativity difference is very small or zero since equal siya. For example, your chlorine molecule, chlorine less chlorine, that has a very small electronegativity difference, meaning there is none to very small dipole moment, and it has no partial charges. So the bond type here is a non-polar covalent bond. And typical example here is your molecules like your oxygen, nitrogen, your methane. And the attraction forces here are weak intermolecular forces, or London dispersion is a good example for this. For your covalent compounds, this is an equal sharing of electrons. So yung example natin kanina na mas nahihila yung isang side. So this is To note that the electronegativity difference must be between 0.4 to 1.7 or meron siyang moderate electronegativity difference. So, this moderate electronegativity difference means that you have a significant dipole moment and it has partial charges. And the bond type here is a polar covalent bond. Typical examples, we have your water, your ammonia, and hydrochloric acid. So our attraction forces here are moderate. We have dipole-dipole and hydrogen bonds. And lastly, your ionic compounds, there is a complete transfer of electrons. Complete transfer meaning the electronegativity difference is very large, greater than 1.7, and there is no dipole moment since we have no partial charges but full charge separation. So you have here your cations and anions, and you have your ionic bonds. So these are the examples for that. And your attraction forces here are strong electrostatic attraction between your ions. So let's have an exercise for this part 1 on chemical bonds. The instruction is predict the bond of the following. You may pause this video so that you can have time to answer each of these, and then you press play again when you are ready to check the answers. For hydrogen fluoride, this is a polar molecule. So polar again, you can see here your electronegativity values. This is easy to see. You have your hydrogen and your fluorine there, two nonmetals. Next, your hydrochloric acid. This is polar again. You have your hydrogen and then your chlorine atom. How about hydrogen iodide? For hydrogen iodide, you have your hydrogen there and your iodide atom there. So that is similar. That's polar molecule, polar bond. For your chlorine atom, you have chlorine here, two of that. This is easy to see. This is your non-polar. And for your silicon dioxide, you have silicon and two oxygen atoms. That is non-polar. So we have this as an example a while back. You have a linear geometry and it cancels out your dipole moments, making it non-polar. Okay, if you got that right, let's move on. There are several applications and softwares on the net with regards to simulation of your ionic and covalent bonding, and this is one under AACT. So, American Association of Chemistry Teacher. You can choose elements from the periodic table to bond. For example, here your sodium and your fluorine atom. It will ask you what type of bond it is, and then predict the number of atoms needed. So it will tell you if it is correct or it is not correct. You can just browse this out and then try it. For example, magnesium here and chlorine atom again. Is it ionic or covalent? And then how many atoms needed? Okay, this is 1.
Chemical bonds are essential for atoms to form a variety of compounds, such as salt, water, or alloys. Understanding chemical bond formation, or more specifically the attraction between atoms, will help to comprehend and predict molecular behavior. The nucleus of an atom is made up of neutrons and positively charged protons, which is surrounded by the negatively charged electrons. When two atoms come close to each other, the electrons from one atom are attracted to the nucleus of the other atom, and vice versa. Simultaneously, nuclei of both atoms repel each other, as do the electrons of each atom. When these interactions lead to a net reduction of the potential energy, a chemical bond
For the recent studies under these chemical bonds in September of 2024, this year, we have a published article under Nature where carbon bonds using a single electron. So we saw a while ago that your carbon usually bonds with two or more. So a recent study has revealed a carbon-carbon bond that uses only one electron. So this is significantly different from the traditional covalent bonds, which typically involve two electrons. And this discovery has important implications for understanding non-standard bonding and could expand how we approach bond formation in chemistry. And this article here, published in 2022, explores misconception about your covalent and ionic bonds, highlighting that no bond is purely one or the other. No bond is purely covalent and purely ionic. So using quantum chemical tools, the authors here analyzed the bonding nature of various compounds to show that bonds have both covalent and ionic character to varying degrees. So that's the end of our part 1 on chemical bonds.